Shabbat Shalom, everybody. This is Rabbi Stephen, Rob Shmuel with you with this week's 10-minute Torah. So as you can see, back home, a little different. So there it is. So I hope you're doing well. Hope you are navigating the hot weather real well. I know it's been a little bit challenging, but such it is for the seasons. Isn't it interesting how the Torah seems to follow seasons? Now, we're coming to the last book of Exodus. I'm sorry, the last book. There's only one book of Exodus, folks. It's like I said, it's the hot weather. We're coming to the last book of Torah, and that's Deuteronomy, which typically falls in the summer. And because it falls at a certain time, the Haftarahs tend to take a little bit of a different track. Okay, so let's explore that a little bit. What is a Haftarah? Haftarah, the Hebrew word, comes from the same root as the word maftir, right? What is the maftir? Well, we know that in Judaism, when we're doing the Torah reading on Shabbat, there are 7 aliyot, 7. That's when we call up 7 witnesses to witness the reading of Torah. So I think we've talked about this before, but there are various Torah readings, not only through the course of a week, but through the course of the year. During the week, Saturday afternoon, Monday morning, and Thursday morning, there are Torah readings. Those are 3 aliyot: Cohen, Levi, and Yisrael. If there's a new moon, either on one of those days or on another day in the week, there's 4. We have the 3 parshas from the week's portion, and the week's portion changes after Saturday morning services. I personally also do the next week's yortzites, those people that have that are observing the memory of a loved one or somebody who has died within that year on the week prior to. So if the person's yortzeit was in the previous week, that's when we do the names. We're doing a week ahead. Okay, so again, 3 during a regular weekday service, 4 when there's a new moon, 5 when there's a festival or Rosh Hashanah, festival being Passover, Shavuot, or Sukkot. So then we do 5 aliyot. 6, Yom Kippur. 7, Shabbat. And by the way, 7 is actually the minimum. We can do as many as we want. We can do 100 aliyot on Shabbat if we want. But we keep to those specific aliyot during the week and during those other situations, because we don't want somebody to come in, walking in on Passover, see 6 aliyot and think it's Yom Kippur and wonder why they're not fasting. This is what the sages say, folks. So at the end, after those 7 readings, we do the Chatzi Kaddish, and the Kaddish serves to separate one part of a service from the next, and the next part of the service is the maftir. And maftir and haftarah come from the Hebrew word, which means kind of like dessert. So it's kind of after. It's almost a separate reading, and it is the last part of that parsha, and the person who is called up for the maftir is typically, not always, but typically the person who's going to read the Haftarah. Now, there have been various times in our history when whatever state we were living in, whatever country we were living in, would not let us observe Torah. So the rabbis went to the book of prophets and found a passage that specifically either mimicked what that parsha was about or enhanced it, something. We are in the time of the year now where that is not the case. We are approaching Tisha B'Av. So there are 3 Haftarahs of Rebuke. And this is where the prophets are basically calling out the Hebrew people, our people, saying you're not, or the king saying you're not doing what we're supposed to, you're reverting to idolatry. And it's leading up to the point where we're going to do the only other time in the year where we do a complete fast. The first time being Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. Other times when we fast, usually it's a minor fast, sun up to sundown. Here it's sundown to sundown, so we're missing 2 meals. After the Tisha B'Av, the Shabbat after Tisha B'Av, we start with the 7 Haftarot of consolation. So now that we've been rebuked, we need, kind of a positive, so we're not all bummed out, for lack of a better term. And this leads us into the high holidays, because, the high holidays are very special. We want to celebrate. And yeah, Yom Kippur is a celebration. Okay, so let's talk about Devarim, or in English, Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy, it's funny I say English because Deuteronomy is derived from a Greek word meaning second. And I've mentioned this before. I always like to say that for those chemistry buffs, the atom hydrogen, the element hydrogen, is basically a proton in the nucleus and an electron. And that's hydrogen, chemical number of 1. If you have a neutron accompanying the proton in the nucleus, you have what's known as an isotope. An isotope is the same number of proton, but you've got different numbers of neutrons. And that is also called deuterium, which is the second isotope. So Deuteronomy is the second recounting. So Moses is now giving the law, or the teaching. Let's call it teaching. Rabbi Hertz makes the point that the word Torah doesn't mean law, it really means teaching. To say it's a law, well, teaching's a little bit more positive, isn't it? So it's the teaching. And remember, this is another generation. This is the new generation that is going to go in to the promised land and conquer the land. So they need to be adept at setting up a society, and they certainly need to be adept at what God's will is going to be. They need to be skilled and to know not just all of Torah, of course, that's important, but specifically, what are the most appropriate and applicable commandments that they're going to need to know in order to set up an ethical and moral society in line with worshiping Hashem, the one true God. And this is what Moses is doing. So consider the first things that Moses opens with. He talks about how their parents, tried him and tested him and tasked him. He talks about how the spies went out and came back, and we get some information. Now, when we got to the portion in Numbers, Shalach lecha, send out spies, if you will. This is what God's telling Moses. It actually is, we now learn it was the reverse. It was the people that said to Moses, hey, let's see what this land is like. And Moses said, okay, let me check with God. And God's like, well, it's up to you. I, really prefer that you trust me because I've shown you that I've got your back. But if you really have to do it, if you really need to send out spies, then go ahead and do it. And this is what Moses does. God, of course, understands who these people are. They come back. 10 of the 12 spies, tell a tale of woe. They exaggerate. They put a negative spin, on what they found. People get upset. God says, all right, I've had it with you people. You've tested me 10 times. You really don't deserve to go into the land. So it's your children that are going to go settle the land. And Moses is telling them this. Why does Moses specifically talk about how people tested him and complained and then went and just did a negative report of the land? He starts with this. He kind of starts with a negative. It's almost a rebuke of the new generation, basically saying, don't do what your parents did. You have grown up in the wilderness. You've seen God's mercy. You have not seen slavery. You don't have that slave mentality where you've been bullied. You've been oppressed all your life. And now you fear your master. You fear anybody who's in authority. You don't have the backbone, to be a free person. You're used to the yoke of slavery. So Moses is warning his people. He's also saying, trust in God. Don't go off and do something different. Use this as a learning experience. Moses also, and this is where our triennial portion comes in, talks about how God says, okay, when you're traveling, you're going to get to the kingdom of Edom, which is Esau's descendants, and you're going to get to Moab, which are Jethro's. These are important people. With Esau, God promised Esau that you will have land and you will have descendants. There'll be tribes, and I will honor your land because after all, your father was Isaac, your mother was Rebekah, right? So why not? Moab, the Moabites, they were Jethro, right? Jethro was, their ancestors, so or their fathers. So, by his merit, also Lot's people. Lot, right? Because Lot was Abraham's nephew or cousin, and he was kind of under Abraham's wing. So God is basically telling Moses, there's going to be some people that are really kind of abhorrent that I'm going to ask you to conquer. These are not them. Okay, I've made promises to them. I'm going to keep my promises, and this is an example of divine justice. So, Shabbat Shalom. Let's think about this. Everything has to be put into context, and we have to think about this divine justice. So, see if for services, we're using the new scroll, the new Sephardic Torah. Pretty soon, we're going to go to the long Czechoslovakian Torah, and we're going to re-roll. I'm going to re-roll Sephardic Torah, so we start with Genesis. Okay? Shabbat Shalom. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you soon.